We are losing this deal right now!
Sir, please give me 30 seconds.
You?
Give me 30 seconds.
You?
He will sign today. I saved the conversation.
The most powerful man in the room was helpless. Arthur Vance, a name synonymous with innovation and ruthless efficiency, a man who flew to Munich on his Gulfstream G700, was sweating through his $20,000 Brioni suit. His empire, Vance Innovations, was on the verge of the biggest acquisition in its history, a deal that would secure his legacy for a generation. But as the stern-faced German executives took their seats, Arthur's world shrank to the size of a single unanswered phone call. His translator was gone, and in the deafening silence of misunderstanding, a billion-dollar dream was turning into a career-ending nightmare. He didn't notice the waitress clearing the adjacent table, but she had noticed everything. The restaurant was the kind of place where money didn't speak. It whispered. It was called Tantris, a temple of modern German cuisine nestled in Munich, a place with a 2 Michelin star rating and a waiting list longer than most people's mortgages. For Arthur Vance, however, securing the private dining room, the garden room had taken a single phone call. Power was a universal language after all, or so he thought. He checked his Patek Philippe for the 10th time in 5 minutes. 7:05 p.m. The Kruger Mechatronics delegation was due at 7:10 p.m. His own translator, Julian Croft, was due at 6:45 p.m. "Mark, call him again." Arthur snapped his voice, a low growl that cut through the refined ambiance. Mark Phillips, his junior vice president of acquisitions and professional yes-man, fumbled with his phone. "I'm trying Mr. Vance. It's going straight to voicemail. Again." "Did you try his hotel, the Mandarin Oriental? Send someone there. I don't care if you have to break down the door. Get him." "Yes, Mr. Vance." Mark scurried out of the room, his face pale. Arthur stood and paced the length of the room, a caged tiger in a bespoke suit. The deal on the table was for the acquisition of Kruger Mechatronics, a family-owned German engineering titan that held the patents to the world's most advanced robotic articulation systems. For Vance Innovations, a leader in AI and software, this wasn't just an acquisition. It was the key to creating fully autonomous robotics, a market projected to be worth trillions. It was his magnum opus. But Friedrich Schmidt, the patriarch and CEO of Kruger Mechatronics, was old school. He detested video calls and refused to negotiate in English, seeing it as a form of cultural capitulation. "If you wish to buy a German masterpiece, you will do so in the German tongue, in a German city." He had stated not as a request, but as a term. So here Arthur was, lost. He had built an empire on logic data and ruthless negotiation, but without Julian, he was functionally illiterate and mute. He glanced out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the meticulously sculpted garden, but saw only the reflection of his own mounting fear. This was a weakness he had never anticipated. He paid brilliant people to handle these things. Languages were a soft skill, a triviality for aides and assistants. Now that triviality was a chasm, threatening to swallow his entire deal. At that moment, a waitress entered the room. She moved with a quiet efficiency that made her almost invisible. Her name tag read Elena. She had dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in the entire room in a single glance. She was refilling the water glasses, her movements fluid and practiced. Arthur barely registered her presence. She was just part of the furniture. "Sir, your water," she said in softly accented but perfect English, placing a crystal glass on the table. He grunted in response, his eyes still glued to the door. Elena retreated to a discreet corner of the room to polish silverware, her posture betraying none of the tension she felt. She had been working at Tantris for 2 years, ever since her life had been derailed. She had overheard enough conversations in this room to piece together a mosaic of the city's corporate elite. She knew who Arthur Vance was. His face had been on the cover of Forbes and Wired. She also knew who Friedrich Schmidt was. The man was a local legend, a bastion of Bavarian industry. She saw the raw panic behind Arthur's steely facade. She saw the empty chair where a translator should be, and she heard the distinct, formal German tones from the hallway as the hosts announced the arrival of the Kruger delegation. Arthur Vance froze. His blood ran cold. Through the ornate glass doors he saw them, Friedrich Schmidt, a man in his late 70s, with a gaze as sharp as a laser cutter, flanked by his two sons, Thomas and Jürgen, and their chief legal counsel. They were punctual. They were precise. They were everything he was not at this moment. Mark rushed back into the room, his face ashen. "Mr. Vance, they're here." "Julian, his room is empty. The concierge said he checked out this morning. A car from a rival firm, a subsidiary of Cybercorp, picked him up." The betrayal hit Arthur like a physical blow. Cybercorp, his arch-nemesis, run by the vulture capitalist Marcus Thorne. It wasn't an accident. It was corporate espionage of the most brutal kind. Julian had been poached deliberately on the eve of the most important meeting of Arthur's life. He had been surgically removed to make Arthur fail. Arthur straightened his tie, a futile gesture of control in a situation spiraling into chaos. He was trapped. He was about to walk into a billion-dollar negotiation, utterly, completely blind. The door opened. Herr Schmidt and his entourage entered, their faces impassive masks of German formality. Arthur Vance, the titan of tech, could do nothing but offer a weak, strained smile. The silence that followed was the most expensive sound he had ever heard. Friedrich Schmidt extended a hand, his grip firm and dry. "Herr Vance," he said, his German crisp and authoritative. "Es ist eine Ehre." "It is an honor." Arthur took the hand, his own slightly damp. He knew enough courtesy phrases to be dangerous. "Guten Abend, Herr Schmidt." He managed the words, feeling clumsy and foreign in his mouth. He gestured vaguely towards the chairs. "Bitte." "Please." The Germans sat. They arranged their leather-bound folders on the polished mahogany table with a silent, synchronized precision that was in itself intimidating. They looked at him, their expressions ranging from neutral to mildly impatient. They were waiting. Arthur's mind was a maelstrom. He looked at Mark, who simply shrugged his eyes wide with useless panic. Mark could sell a software package in 5 languages, but German wasn't one of them. Arthur's entire team for this trip had been built around Julian the linchpin, who had just been pulled. He cleared his throat. "There has been a slight delay," he said in English, speaking slowly, as if that would magically make them understand. Jürgen Schmidt, the younger son and CTO, leaned forward. He spoke English, but with a deliberate, almost challenging formality. "A delay, Mr. Vance. We were under the impression that punctuality was a cornerstone of your business philosophy." "My translator," Arthur began, hating the weakness in his voice. "He has been unexpectedly detained." Friedrich Schmidt said something in German to his elder son, Thomas, his voice low and rumbling. Thomas nodded, a flicker of what looked like disdain crossing his face. The atmosphere in the room went from chilly to arctic. To them, this wasn't an unforeseen circumstance. It was a catastrophic failure of planning. It was disrespectful. It suggested that Arthur Vance didn't take this meeting, this monumental fusion of their legacies, seriously. From her corner, Elena watched the disaster unfold. She wasn't just a waitress. She was Elena Petrova, once the top of her class in international business at Sophia University. She spoke 5 languages fluently, Bulgarian, Russian, English, French, and after 2 years of working and studying in Munich, impeccable German. Her dream had been a corner office at a firm like McKinsey or Goldman Sachs. But that dream had evaporated when her father was diagnosed with a rare neurological disorder. The mountain of medical bills had forced her to drop out of her MBA program and take any job she could find. Life had humbled her, but it hadn't extinguished the fire in her mind. She understood the subtext of the conversation perfectly. She recognized the specific Bavarian dialect. Herr Schmidt used the subtle formality that demanded an equal level of respect. She saw Arthur Vance, a man used to absolute control, floundering like a beached whale. His body language screamed desperation, the slight tremor in his hand as he reached for his water, the way his eyes darted between the impassive German faces. This was more than a business meeting. For Herr Schmidt, he was selling his family's legacy, a company built by his grandfather's hands. He needed to know it was going to someone who respected its foundations, and Arthur Vance was failing the very first test. Arthur tried again, this time addressing Jürgen. "My apologies. This is highly irregular. If we could perhaps reschedule..." Friedrich Schmidt cut in, speaking German again. This time his tone was sharp, final. Thomas translated his voice flat. "My father says that he cleared his schedule for this meeting. He flew in from our Hamburg facility. We do not reschedule. We either conduct our business, or we conclude that there is no business to conduct." The unspoken threat hung in the air. Walk away now and the deal is dead forever. Arthur felt a knot of pure fury tighten in his stomach. Fury at Julian for his betrayal at Marcus Thorne, for his scheming, and at himself for his own arrogance. He had walked into the lion's den without his temmer. He had $1 billion checkbook in his pocket, but couldn't even ask them if they wanted a drink. He was about to concede defeat. He was mentally drafting the press release that would announce the collapse of the acquisition, the statement that would wipe $10 billion off his company's market cap by morning. His legacy was turning to ash before his eyes. It was then that Elena made her decision. Fear warred with opportunity in her chest. Her boss would fire her on the spot. She could be humiliated. These were powerful men who could crush her without a second thought. But she also saw a door, a tiny crack of light in the dark tunnel her life had become. She had spent 2 years serving men like this, invisible silent, while her mind screamed that she was their equal. This was her one insane, unpredictable chance to prove it. She put down the silver tray she was polishing. The soft clink echoed in the tense silence. Every head in the room turned towards her. Arthur Vance looked at her with pure, unadulterated annoyance. "Who the hell is this waitress?" Elena took a deep breath, straightened her simple black uniform, and stepped forward. She walked not to Arthur Vance, but directly to Friedrich Schmidt. She stopped a respectful distance from the head of the table, inclined her head slightly, and began to speak. Her German was not just fluent, it was flawless. It was the formal, respectful Hochdeutsch, reserved for business and academia. "Herr Schmidt, meine Herren." She began her voice, calm and clear. "Bitte entschuldigen Sie die Unterbrechung und die offensichtliche Verwirrung. Mr. Schmidt, gentlemen? Please excuse the interruption and the obvious confusion." Stunned silence. The 3 Schmidt men stared at her, their eyebrows raised in unison. Arthur Vance looked back and forth between them and Eleanor, his mind unable to process what was happening. Mark Phillips looked like he was about to faint. Eleanor continued her gaze steady on Friedrich Schmidt. "Mein Name ist Elena Petrova. Es ist offensichtlich, dass Herr Vance in einer unglücklichen und unvorhergesehenen Lage ist. Vielleicht bis sein offizieller Dolmetscher eintrifft, könnte ich aushelfen. My name is Elena Petrova. It is apparent that Mr. Vance is in an unfortunate and unforeseen position. Perhaps until his official interpreter arrives, I might be of assistance. She had offered him an out. She hadn't said the translator was gone for good. She had framed it as a temporary solution, a way to salvage the evening's dignity. It was a masterful piece of diplomacy, delivered by a woman holding a stack of polished spoons. Friedrich Schmidt leaned back in his chair, a long, slow, deliberate movement. He stroked his chin, his sharp eyes, scrutinizing her from head to toe. He saw the cheap uniform, but he heard the expensive education in her voice. He saw a waitress, but he detected an intellect that was anything but common. After a silence that felt like an eternity, he gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. Setzen Sie sich, he commanded. Sit down. The command, Setzen Sie sich, was directed at Elena, but it sent a shock wave through the room. Arthur Vance watched utterly bewildered as the waitress who had just served him water pulled up a chair and placed it between his seat and Herr Schmidt's. It was a power move, positioning herself not as an aid, but as a nexus, a bridge between two worlds. What the hell is going on? Arthur whispered harshly to Mark. Who is she? I don't know, sir. Mark stammered. She works for the restaurant. Get her out of here, Arthur hissed, ready to reclaim control of the spiraling situation. But before he could utter a word of dismissal, Elena turned to him. Her demeanor had shifted. The deferential waitress was gone. In her place was a poised, confident professional. Her English was crisp with only the faintest trace of an Eastern European accent. Mr. Vance, she said, her voice low but firm, with all due respect, you are about to lose this deal. Your translator has not been detained. He has been poached by Cybercorp. This is not a delay. It is an act of industrial sabotage. Herr Schmidt and his sons see your lack of a contingency plan as a profound sign of disrespect. They believe if you cannot manage a simple meeting, you cannot be trusted with their family's 100-year-old legacy. Right now, I am your only chance to salvage this. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, puncturing his pride and laying the brutal truth bare. She knew about Cybercorp. She had diagnosed the entire situation in minutes. He was floored by her audacity and against his will impressed by her acuity. Desperation was a powerful motivator. He had no other cards to play. He gave a tight, almost imperceptible nod. Fine, but one wrong word and you're out. Elena's expression didn't change. She simply turned back to the German delegation. Herr Schmidt, she began in German, her tone now one of a seasoned diplomat. Mr. Vance extends his most sincere and profound apologies. The situation with his translator was not an unforeseen event, but the result of a malicious action by a competitor. He holds Kruger Mechatronics in the highest esteem, and his presence here, even in this compromised position, is a testament to his unwavering commitment to this partnership. She had taken Arthur's panicked silence and reframed it. It was no longer incompetence. It was stoicism in the face of an attack. It was a brilliant spin. Friedrich Schmidt listened, his expression unreadable. He then spoke a long and complex statement in German. Elena listened intently, her eyes never leaving his. She didn't just hear the words. She watched his posture, the slight tightening of his jaw, the way his sons glanced at him for confirmation. When he finished, she paused for a beat, processing not just the text, but the subtext. She turned to Arthur. Herr Schmidt says that, while the circumstances are regrettable, the fact remains that the foundation of any successful partnership is trust and meticulous preparation. He wants to know why, if this deal is as important as you claim, you did not have a backup. He says, a man who brings only one key to a vault he wishes to open does not truly believe in the value of its contents. Arthur felt the sting of the critique. Julian had been with him for 10 years. The idea of him being compromised was unthinkable. But Schmidt was right. It was a failure of imagination on his part. "Tell him," Arthur said, his voice regaining some of its familiar command, "that my loyalty to my team has, in this case, become a liability. I trusted my key man. That trust was betrayed. But my belief in the value of what's in that vault, the Kruger legacy, has never been stronger. Tell him that the man who built Vance Innovations from his garage doesn't give up when a key is stolen. He finds another way to open the door." Elena translated, but not literally. A direct translation would sound like a canned line from an American action movie. Instead, she adapted it for the German ear, infusing it with concepts of loyalty. Loyalität, Trust, Vertrauen and Perseverance, Beharrlichkeit. She conveyed the sentiment, not just the dictionary definitions. Herr Vance erklärt, dass seine Loyalität zu seinem Team in diesem Fall zu einer Schwachstelle wurde. Er sagt, der Mann, der Vance Innovations in seiner Garage aufgebaut hat, gibt nicht auf, wenn ein Schlüssel gestohlen wird. Er findet einen anderen Weg, die Tür zu öffnen. Er ist hier, um diesen neuen Weg zu finden mit ihnen. Mr. Vance explains that his loyalty to his team became a vulnerability in this instance. He says the man who built Vance Innovations in his garage does not give up when a key is stolen. He finds another way to open the door. He is here to find that new way with you. She added that last phrase, "with you," on her own. It was a subtle but crucial addition, transforming Arthur's unilateral statement into a collaborative one. A flicker of interest appeared in Friedrich Schmidt's eyes. He gestured for the wine to be poured. The first test was over. The negotiation could begin. For the next hour, Elena was a whirlwind. She didn't just translate, she conducted. She was a master interpreter, not of language, but of meaning. When Arthur's brash American style of negotiation, all aggressive posturing and bold declarations, threatened to offend, she would soften the edges. She'd translate, "My final offer is," into "we believe a fair valuation would be." Conversely, when Herr Schmidt made a dry, understated point about maintaining the company's Mittelstand culture, a uniquely German concept referring to the spirit of small and medium-sized family-owned enterprises, she didn't just translate the word. She explained the concept to Arthur in a quick, whispered aside. "He's not just talking about company size," she murmured to him, while the Germans conferred. "He's talking about a philosophy long-term stability over short-term profit-deep employee loyalty, a commitment to the local community. If you talk only about synergy and shareholder value, you will lose him. You need to talk about legacy." Arthur stared at her. His own Ivy League-educated M&A team had given him a 300-page briefing book on Kruger Mechatronics, and not one of them had explained the core of the company's soul so succinctly. He began to see her not as a stopgap, but as a weapon. They moved from pleasantries to the nuts and bolts of the deal valuation integration timelines and leadership structures. With Eleanor as the bridge, the chasm between the two corporate cultures began to close. But as they approached the most contentious issue, the patents, the mood in the room tensed once more. The easy part was over. The real battle was about to begin. The issue of the patents was the heart of the deal. Kruger Mechatronics held 17 key patents on haptic feedback articulation, the technology that allowed robotic arms to mimic the sensitivity of a human hand. For Arthur's AI to truly integrate with the physical world, he needed that technology exclusively. For Friedrich Schmidt, those patents were his grandfather's genius, his father's life's work, and his own legacy. They were the soul of his company. Thomas Schmidt, the elder son and the company's COO, laid out their position in firm, deliberate German. He was the guardian of the family's heritage, and his stance was rigid. Elena listened, her expression neutral, but her mind was racing. When he finished, she turned to Arthur. "This is the sticking point," she said, her voice low. "They are proposing a licensing agreement, not a full sale of the intellectual property. They want to grant Vance Innovations exclusive use for a period of 20 years, after which the IP reverts to the Schmidt Family Foundation. They are adamant that the patents themselves must never be owned by an outside entity. They want to retain control of their grandfather's legacy." Arthur's face hardened. A licensing agreement was a non-starter. "No, absolutely not," he stated flatly. "The entire valuation of this deal is predicated on a full acquisition of the IP. My shareholders, my board, they will never approve a deal where our core technology is effectively a rental. 20 years is nothing in the tech world. We need to own it. It's the only way to justify the premium I'm willing to pay. Tell them that. No deal without the patents." This was the kind of blunt, take-it-or-leave-it ultimatum that had won Arthur countless negotiations in Silicon Valley. But Eleanor knew that in this room it would be a grenade. The Schmidts would see it as a hostile, disrespectful demand to purchase their family's soul. She took a breath, choosing her next words carefully. This was the moment she would either be fired or prove her indispensable worth. She turned to the Schmidts. She did not translate Arthur's ultimatum. Instead, she began a discourse. "Herr Schmidt," she said in German, her tone respectful and collaborative. "Mr. Vance fully understands and deeply respects the profound significance of these patents. He recognizes that they are not merely legal documents, but a testament to 3 generations of German innovation. His goal is not to absorb this legacy, but to amplify it." Arthur shot her a confused, angry look. That wasn't what he'd said at all. He started to interrupt, but Eleanor held up a hand, a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture for him to wait. He was so stunned by her audacity that he fell silent. She continued, addressing the Germans. "Mr. Vance's vision is to pair the unparalleled hardware of Kruger Mechatronics with the world's most advanced AI learning software. He believes that by fully integrating the IP, not just licensing it, he can create a new entity, a global leader that will carry the Kruger name into the next century and beyond. He is proposing a true fusion, a marriage of German engineering and American innovation. To do this, a simple licensing agreement creates legal and developmental barriers that would stifle that very growth." She was performing a high-wire act of real-time diplomatic translation. She had taken Arthur's hammer and reforged it into a key, presenting his demand not as an ultimatum, but as a prerequisite for achieving a shared, grander vision. Jürgen Schmidt, the tech-savvy younger son, seemed intrigued. He responded in German, asking a series of highly technical questions about the integration process and the potential for software to corrupt the precision of their hardware. The questions were complex, touching on algorithmic interpretation of sensory data and fail-safe protocols. A normal translator would have struggled getting lost in the jargon. But Elena, a voracious reader who had spent her lonely nights in Munich devouring tech journals and business case studies to keep her mind sharp, was prepared. As Jürgen spoke, she was already formulating the response in her head, drawing on an article she had read in MIT Technology Review about Vance Innovations' new neural net architecture. She translated Jürgen's question for Arthur. "He's concerned about the integrity of the hardware. He's asking how your AI would handle anomalous data from the haptic sensors without compromising the robotic arm's physical stability. Essentially, he's asking if your software could make their hardware break. Arthur was impressed. She had cut right to the core of the technical challenge. He launched into a detailed explanation of his Vance AI Guardian protocol, a 3-tiered fail-safe system that used predictive modeling to isolate and sandbox any software instability. Elena translated his complex, jargon-filled explanation into elegant, precise German. She used the correct technical terminology, demonstrating a level of understanding that stunned Jürgen. He began to engage directly with her, the two of them building a conceptual bridge between the two technologies. Arthur watched for the first time in the meeting, feeling like an outsider at his own negotiation. He wasn't leading this. He was a participant, and Eleanor was the conductor. But Friedrich Schmidt remained unmoved. The technical details were secondary to his main concern. He held up a hand, silencing his son. "Das ist alles gut und schön," he said, his voice laced with skepticism. "That is all well and good." He then spoke for a full minute, his gaze locked on Eleanor, his words carrying the weight of a final judgment. When he finished, the room was silent. Eleanor's face was grave. She turned to Arthur. "He is not convinced. He says that vision and technology are fleeting. He has seen American companies buy German firms before. He speaks of Datamec, a company from Stuttgart, bought by a Silicon Valley conglomerate in the 90s. They were promised a partnership, a fusion. Within 5 years, the American parent company had stripped all the valuable IP, closed the German factories, and fired 2,000 workers. The brand was sold for scrap. He says, 'Your words are eloquent, young lady. But history has taught me to distrust eloquent words. How can Mr. Vance guarantee that the Kruger name and my employees will be protected, not just for 20 years, but forever?' The ghost of a past betrayal loomed over the table. The deal was no longer about money or technology. It was about trust. Arthur Vance had no answer. His usual arsenal of financial incentives and contractual clauses seemed weak and meaningless in the face of such a deeply personal and historical wound. The deal was on the brink of collapse, and this time it wasn't a language barrier. It was a chasm of trust that seemed impossible to cross. Arthur looked at Elena, his expression a mixture of desperation and a newfound burgeoning respect. He had no more moves to make. The next word was hers. The silence in the room was heavy, thick with the weight of history and mistrust. Friedrich Schmidt's challenge, the story of Datamec, was not a negotiating tactic. It was an emotional shield, a wall built from the bitter experience of a fellow countryman. Arthur Vance's playbook had no counter for it. He could offer financial guarantees, termination penalties, board seats, all the standard tools of corporate acquisition. But Schmidt was asking for something else, something intangible, a guarantee of honor. Arthur looked at Eleanor, his expression completely blank. He had nothing. His mind, usually a supercomputer of strategic calculations, was offline. Eleanor saw the impasse. She knew that another translated promise from Arthur would be worthless. The bridge of words had reached its limit. What they needed now was a new kind of bridge, one built of structure, not just sentiment. Her mind, freed from the simple task of translation, began to work on the underlying problem. She wasn't a waitress anymore, nor was she just an interpreter. In that moment, she was the strategist she was always meant to be. Her memory flashed back to a case study from her MBA program, a class on cross-border M&A, taught by a professor who had been a partner at Bain & Company. It was a famously complex deal between a Swedish pharmaceutical giant and a Japanese biotech startup. The problem had been almost identical, a clash between a legacy-focused founder and a growth-obsessed acquirer over the control of core intellectual property. The solution had been radical, elegant, and had become legendary in business schools. And it might just work here. She turned first to Arthur, speaking in a low, urgent English. "Mr. Vance, your approach is a full-body transplant. He is afraid it will kill the patient. A licensing agreement is like being a landlord. It's not enough for you. What if there is a third way? Not an acquisition, not a license, but a true synthesis." "What are you talking about?" Arthur asked, his patience wearing thin. "Don't offer to buy Kruger Mechatronics," she said, her eyes alight with intellectual fire. "Offer to create something new." Before he could respond, she turned to Friedrich Schmidt and began to speak in German. Her tone was no longer that of an interpreter, but of a peer presenting a bold new concept. "Herr Schmidt, your concern is entirely valid." She began her words resonating with empathy. "The history of datamech is a cautionary tale, a lesson that everyone in this room should heed. A simple acquisition, no matter how many contractual promises are made, cannot guarantee the preservation of a legacy. So I would like to ask Mr. Vance to consider proposing something different." She paused, ensuring she had the complete attention of every man at the table. "What if Vance Innovations did not acquire Kruger Mechatronics?" She continued. "Instead, what if our two companies formed a new independent entity, a joint venture? Let us call it, for the sake of this discussion, Kruger Vance Robotics. This new company would be headquartered here in Munich. It would be a German company subject to German corporate law and labor regulations, ensuring the protection of your workforce." Jürgen and Thomas exchanged a look of intrigue. Their father remained stone-faced, but he was listening. Elena pressed on, laying out the framework of the idea that was crystallizing in her mind. Kruger Mechatronics would place all 17 of its key patents into this new entity. In exchange, the Schmidt Family Foundation would receive a significant permanent equity stake, say 30% in Kruger Vance Robotics. You would not be selling your legacy, you would be investing it. She then turned the concept towards Arthur's needs. Vance Innovations, for its part, would inject the capital, the full acquisition price we have been discussing, into this new company as its operating budget. And it would contribute its own exclusive perpetual license for the Vance AI Guardian software. The result, a new powerfully funded German company with a dual heritage. The Kruger hardware and the Vance software fuse together from day one. Mr. Vance achieves his technological synthesis, and you, Herr Schmidt, retain a permanent stake and a board seat, giving you perpetual oversight and ensuring the Kruger name and culture are not just preserved, but are the bedrock of this new global powerhouse. It was breathtaking. In less than 2 minutes, she had dismantled the entire existing negotiation and proposed a completely new structure. It wasn't a compromise that left both sides half-happy. It was a synergistic solution that addressed the core desires of both parties. It protected Schmidt's legacy and his people, while giving Arthur the integrated control over the technology he craved, all wrapped in a financially and legally sound structure. Arthur Vance was thunderstruck. He looked at Elena, and for the first time he didn't see a waitress or a translator. He saw a brilliant deal-maker, a strategist of the highest caliber. His own M&A team, with their Wharton MBAs and 100-hour work weeks, had never conceived of something so elegant. They had been trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and she had just redesigned the entire machine. Jürgen Schmidt, the CTO, broke the silence. He spoke in excited German, firing off questions about the governance structure, the R&D budget, the leadership of the new entity. Thomas, the cautious COO, raised concerns about dividend policies and shareholder rights. Elena handled it all. She fielded their questions with astonishing poise, demonstrating a deep intuitive understanding of corporate finance and governance. She moderated the discussion, translating and contributing, shaping the raw concept into a viable plan. Finally, Friedrich Schmidt held up his hand again. The room fell silent. He looked at Arthur, then at his sons. Then his old piercing eyes settled on Eleanor. He spoke one sentence in German, his voice a low, respectful rumble. Eleanor translated for Arthur, a small, triumphant smile finally gracing her lips. He says, "This is a proposal of intelligence and honor. This is a basis for a true partnership." He wants to know the name of the brilliant strategist from your M&A team who conceived of this. Arthur Vance looked across the table at the patriarch of German industry. He looked at the woman in the simple black uniform who had just saved his billion-dollar deal. And he knew with absolute certainty that his life and hers would never be the same again. The tension in the room had evaporated, replaced by a palpable buzz of excitement and possibility. The rest of the dinner was a whirlwind of constructive energy. With Eleanor's joint venture proposal as the new foundation, the previously insurmountable obstacles became mere details to be ironed out. Jürgen and Arthur geeked out over the possibilities of integrated R&D teams. Thomas and Mark began sketching out the financial architecture of the new German entity. Friedrich Schmidt, for his part, largely observed, but his stern demeanor had softened. He would occasionally pose a question directly to Eleanor in German, not about the deal, but about her. He asked about her studies, about her family, about her home. He was no longer assessing a translator. He was taking the measure of a person. As the evening drew to a close, handshakes were exchanged. This time they were not the stiff formalities of the meeting's start, but the firm, warm grips of new partners. We will have our lawyers draft a preliminary term sheet based on Fräulein Petrova's excellent proposal, Friedrich Schmidt said in German, which Elena translated. He then looked directly at Elena and added, "Young woman, you have a mind that is far too valuable to be polishing silver. Do not waste it." It was the highest form of praise from a man who did not offer it lightly. With a final round of Auf Wiedersehen, the Schmidt delegation departed. The door to the private dining room clicked shut, leaving Arthur, Mark, and Eleanor alone in the sudden silence. The table was a mess of wine, glasses, dessert plates, and hastily scribbled notes on napkins, the detritus of a battle won. Mark was beaming, giddy with relief. "Mr. Vance, I can't believe it. You pulled it off. That was genius, sir. Pure genius." Arthur didn't even look at him. His eyes were fixed on Eleanor, who was quietly gathering the used napkins, her ingrained habits as a waitress momentarily taking over. "Leave it," Arthur said. His voice was quiet, stripped of its usual arrogance. Elena stopped her hand hovering over a napkin covered in Jürgen's diagrams. "Mark," Arthur continued, his gaze still locked on Elena. "Go back to the hotel. Get the legal team in London on a secure video call. I want our top M&A lawyers. Get me David Grossman. Wake him up if you have to. Brief them on the joint venture concept. Tell them to be ready for my call in 1 hour." "Yes, sir. Right away, sir," Mark said, practically tripping over himself to leave the room and the intense charged atmosphere that had descended. The door clicked shut again. Now it was just the two of them, the billionaire and the waitress. Arthur gestured to the chair opposite him. "Please, sit." Elena sat her posture straight, her hands folded in her lap. The professional mask was back in place, but behind her calm eyes, her heart was hammering against her ribs. For a long moment, Arthur just looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time. He saw the intelligence that shone in her eyes, the quiet dignity in her bearing, and the faint traces of weariness that spoke of a life harder than it should have been. I have 2 questions, he said finally. And I want you to be completely honest with me. First, who are you? Elena took a steadying breath. My name is Elena Petrova. I am from Sofia, Bulgaria. I was a student at Sofia University, top of my class, majoring in international business and finance. I was accepted into the MBA program at INSEAD. My dream was to work for a company like yours. Was, Arthur prompted gently. My father fell ill, she said, her voice losing a fraction of its composure. A degenerative nerve disease. The treatment was experimental, expensive, and not covered by any insurance. My family sold everything we had. It wasn't enough. I dropped out of the program, gave up my scholarship, and came to Germany, because the pay for even menial work was better than a professional salary back home. I've been working here, and at a cafe in the mornings for 2 years. I send most of my money home for his medical care. The story was simple, unadorned, and devastatingly real. It explained everything, the flawless languages learned through academia, the sharp business acumen honed in a classroom she was forced to abandon, the quiet desperation that fueled her audacious gamble tonight. Arthur felt a pang of something he rarely experienced: humility. He had spent the day panicking about $1 billion deal, a rounding error in his vast fortune. This woman was fighting a daily battle for her family's survival, with an intellect that rivaled and perhaps surpassed his own. He nodded slowly, processing her story. That answers my first question. Now for the second one. That proposal, the joint venture, you said you asked me to consider proposing it. But that wasn't my idea. It was yours. Why did you give me the credit in that room? Elena met his gaze without flinching. Because you were the one they needed to believe in, Mr. Vance. I am a waitress. If I had presented that idea as my own, they would have seen it as a curiosity, a novelty. They might have been impressed, but they would not have taken it seriously as a cornerstone for $1 billion deal. The proposal needed your authority to have weight. It needed to be your idea. In that room, I was your translator. My job was to ensure your message was received in the most effective way possible, and the most effective message was that Arthur Vance was a creative, flexible partner who could devise a solution of intelligence and honor. My ego was not important. The deal was. Arthur Vance leaned back in his chair, completely silenced. She hadn't just saved his deal. She hadn't just come up with a brilliant strategy. She had understood the nuances of power, ego, and perception in the room with a sophistication that his entire executive team lacked. She had played the game better than he had. He thought of Julian the traitor, who had sold him out for a paycheck from Marcus Thorne. He thought of Mark the sycophant, who was useless in a crisis. He had surrounded himself with people who cost millions and were worth nothing when it mattered. And here in a Munich restaurant, he had found a woman bussing tables who was utterly priceless. Arthur Vance stared at Elena, a slow, profound reassessment occurring behind his eyes. The world he knew, a world neatly divided into assets and liabilities, predators and prey, was being redrawn by the quiet woman sitting opposite him. For 2 years, he said more to himself than to her. You've been serving wine and clearing plates with that mind. That's a staggering waste of human capital. Elena offered a wry, tired smile. You learn a lot about people when they think you're invisible. You learn to read a room. You learn who is kind, who is cruel, and who is just putting on a show. It's an education of a different kind. I have no doubt, Arthur said. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, his posture now one of a collaborator, not a superior. Elena, I owe you. A thank you is insufficient. A finder's fee for the deal is an insult. I want to make you an offer." He reached for one of the clean, unused linen napkins and pulled a sleek titanium pen from his jacket pocket. "I am establishing the new entity, Kruger Vance Robotics, in Munich. It will need a leadership team, a bridge between the German engineering culture and the American innovation culture. It will need someone who understands both, who respects both, and who can translate not just language but intent." He started writing on the napkin. "I am creating a new position," he continued, his pen scratching against the linen. "Executive Vice President of Strategy and Integration for Kruger Vance Robotics. The role will be based here in Munich. It will report directly to me and to the new board, on which you will have a non-voting advisory seat for the first year." Elena's eyes widened. She was speechless. This was beyond her wildest dreams. It was the career she had been forced to abandon, handed back to her on a silver platter, or rather, a linen napkin. Arthur kept writing. "The starting salary will be $500,000 per year, plus a signing bonus." He paused, looking up at her. "Let's call the signing bonus a consulting fee for tonight's work. Let's make it an even 2 million euros. That should be enough to ensure your father receives the absolute best medical care in the world anywhere in the world. We can have him flown to the Mayo Clinic or a specialist in Switzerland by the end of the week." Tears welled up in Eleanor's eyes, hot and sudden. She had fought for so long, been so strong, and now this unexpected, overwhelming act of life-changing generosity shattered her composure. She didn't cry for the money or the job title, but for what it represented, the end of a long, desperate struggle. It was the freedom to care for her father without fear. "Furthermore," Arthur added, his voice softer now, "Vance Innovations will cover the full cost of you re-enrolling in and completing your MBA at INSEAD whenever you choose to do so. A mind like yours deserves to be sharpened, not left to gather dust." He finished writing and turned the napkin around, pushing it across the table. It wasn't a legal document, of course, but it was a declaration of intent written in his own hand. It was a promise. Position, EVP Strategy and Integration. Kruger Vance Robotics salary, $500,000 a year. Signing bonus, $2,000. Additional terms, full funding for INSEAD MBA. Full coverage of all Petrova family medical expenses. Start date tomorrow. Elena looked down at the napkin, the words blurring through her tears. It looked like a dream she was afraid to wake up from. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Arthur said simply. "I'm not doing this just to be kind, Elena. I'm doing it because it's the single best business decision I've made all year. I told Herr Schmidt that when a key is stolen, I find another way to open the door. I was wrong. I didn't find a new key tonight. I found a master locksmith." Just then his phone buzzed. It was a text from his head of security. "Mr. Vance, we've confirmed. Julian Croft boarded a Cybercorp jet at 4 p.m. today. Destination their R&D facility in Austin. Intel suggests Marcus Thorne paid him 7 figures to sabotage your meeting." Arthur showed the message to Eleanor. "Thorne thought he was taking my most valuable piece off the board," he said with a grim smile. "He has no idea that all he did was make room for my queen." Elena finally looked up, the tears wiped away, replaced by a look of fierce determination. The waitress was gone forever. In her place sat a future titan of industry. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and steady. "My answer is yes, Mr. Vance. Call me Arthur," he replied, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "Welcome to the team. Our first order of business is tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. We're going to build a $1 trillion company, and then we're going to make Marcus Thorne regret the day he was ever born." That single evening in Munich wasn't just the beginning of a successful company. It was the start of a legend. Elena Petrova's story became a quiet inspiration within the walls of Vance Innovations. It's a powerful reminder that the most brilliant minds and courageous hearts are often hidden in plain sight, waiting for a single opportunity to change the world. Her journey from a Munich restaurant to the boardroom proves that talent isn't defined by a job title, and your circumstances don't have to define your destiny. It's about having the courage to step forward when everyone else is stepping back, and the wisdom to see a solution where others only see a problem. If this story of unexpected triumph and incredible transformation inspired you, please show your support by hitting that like button and sharing it with someone who needs to hear that their big break could be just one moment away. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more incredible stories of when hidden genius meets opportunity. What did you think of Elena's bold move? Let me know in the comments below.